Good day, everyone. I'm Faize, and welcome back to Faize Plays Windward. I've got more people with me with this series of 0 to 100, and I probably should have said this before. We will have people cycling in and out as schedules change and circumstances happen. Uh, but we got some new people here, and we're missing one person, but that's all fine. That should not inflict the level of detail in our little guide-like series here. So anyways, let's get started.
Woo!
Okay, so we did a bunch of combats before, so maybe we should touch on region contests, or didn't we? Isn't that a level 15 thing, contesting a region?
It is. Also, we'll need a global to get it started if we want to do it on this particular map. Once a map is consolidated, region to region, as this one is, there's no one that's of the starter groups that are vesting interest along the border. So someone would have to have control of the next region,
Yeah.
other than the yellow faction. We could start embassies, but it would take a trick or two to get that to go. It would take a global faction basically to get that started. So maybe we should do another combat instance of it. Might be the best way to get us to level.
Yeah, we can do that. Let's jump right into that.
Trying to invite us is going to be a pain with this list.
Oh, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Sid. Hello, everyone.
Hi there. I go by the name of, Tackleville normally.
Hello, I go by Wash's style, normally.
Alright, we're in the combat. Again. We need people.
Blow things up. It's time to go boom.
Yes.
So one thing we can talk about is wind effects. If you're facing towards the wind as you're sailing, you're going to have more trouble than if you're going with the wind, of course. If you angle around the wind, if you have to face into it, you will pick up speed. Does anyone have tricks that they do to kind of like get into the face of the wind?
Sometimes you just have to rough it out, but I always feel like kind of trying to zigzag diagonally against the wind helps a lot to not come to a halt.
Yeah, I do that. Kind of like attacking left and right to try to pick up speed somewhere.
I usually just sail at the wind at an angle. Like, even if it's blowing straight, like, in the direction that I'm wanting to head, I try to sail to my destination at much of an angle to the wind as possible.
Do you find that mobility helps you in a situation where you're like tacking into the wind or sailing directly, or is it speed that you really want?
Well, at least with mobility, that affects your startup speed and your acceleration and all. Just a general acceleration, so that helps with initial startup going into the wind. But like at least with getting in and out of the angle of the wind, turning speed is mobility is good for increasing turning speed to really do some of those maneuvers of like weaving in and out of the wind to pick up speed. But in general, the speed does help a little, although you kind of get just face planted by the wind if you go straight into it, no matter how fast you go. But what it seems not to affect as much is the flying ships. Like, it does, even if you are in a Dragonfly or a Zeppelin or a Flying Fortress, it doesn't matter if you sail directly into the wind or at an angle, wherever, the wind doesn't seem to have much effect except for pushing you wherever in random directions if you just sit there without holding space to hold yourself steady.
Yeah, they created that item, the heavy anchor. Do you find that useful? The heavy anchor stops you when you're no longer pressing forward. For clarification.
Yeah, I never saw that item or use it. I just hold space. If I want to stop somewhere, I just hold space or I land. But, nah, from my, understanding of the heavy anchor, it's for people who are too lazy to hold the space bar.
I'm fairly convinced after several waves of new players coming into this game and picking up flying ships, I'm fairly convinced that some of them never learned how to use space with or without the anchor.
Probably. Yeah, there's probably something to that.
A lot of
agree.
sailing and flying directly into your flank and just continuing to push forward instead of turning.
Whose hull will win? Hull would decide that if two players collide, the one that pushes the other out of the way has greater hull. At least I believe that's the way it works. Even if you're in a smaller
it's
ship.
not if someone, the person that pushes the person out the way the most, because when I'm in my Corvette, I push ships out of the way all the time. Like when I ram them, I end up pushing them. It's just that because of the angle of which I hit them. But that doesn't mean that I've got more hull. They end up doing damage to me, or at least more damage to me than I do to them. So, any visual, physical effects that happen after ramming is not a sign of who has more hull. It's just whoever has more hull is going to do more damage to the other person. I mean, each is going to do... The way that the ramming has changed, each person's... ramming is a little different now than it has been in the past, but if you ram someone, you're gonna get a lot of damage too, but it just depends on how much hull you have compared to the other person, of which the damage to your hull you receive compared to the other person.
You know what you were saying before about mobility being the acceleration and the startup? That's something that I try to tell new players all the time when they're asking, how do they get more speed or what's the fastest ship? Is I always tell them, if you just prioritize mobility a little bit, you will feel faster, even if you haven't actually increased your speed at all.
Oh yeah, well of course. Faster acceleration, you feel like compared going from 0 to 4 knots compared to going to 0 to 5.1 knots at a faster rate, or whatever, is completely, you feel faster going at the slower speed by having a faster, getting to that slower speed faster than you do having a faster speed and getting it to it slower. And also acceleration helps a lot more than speed, especially if you're sitting in a town and then a zeppelin comes over and they're about to grog you, or any other ship comes towards the town and they're about to grog you. It's a lot better to have a high mobility than a high speed because of the acceleration. You can get out of that stationary position faster to avoid that grog barrel.
Yeah. Plus, nobody in this game fights in a straight continuous line, so I definitely think mobility is more important than your top speed.
Yeah, there's a lot of, if you're really, go at it, especially for DPS players that use Corvettes and even the Viking ships or whatever, being able to have a high turning speed is the most important, because if you're a DPS, you're not going to be going in a straight line. The only people that are going to be going in a straight line, pretty much, are the people who are flying. But the people who are sailing are not going to be sailing in a straight line, or they shouldn't be, because then you're not going to be hitting anyone. But with DPS players being able to turn and evade and then get behind a ship is a really important factor, because you do more damage from behind ships than you do from the front or sides. Yeah, I mean, you do a considerable more damage from the sides than you do the front, but the most damage is from the back. But that also depends on the angle of which you fire your volley at the ship, because you might hit the ship from the back, but the angle of which you fired that volley may not directly hit the back, so it won't do hardly any, or it seems like it doesn't do hardly any damage. But then when you get it lined up straight to where you're pretty much straight to the back and not like angled weirdly to the back of the ship, then it does the full front of damage that you can provide. And now, so speaking of DPS ships and damage, I was having a conversation with someone earlier about with DPS if you should choose damage or critical. And my conversation was that it depends on your playstyle. If you want a high crit or high damage, or a mix of the two, because you can go from one extreme to the other, or have a mix of the two, and eat all three of those, and in between are valid playstyles for a DPS. Because at least with critical, it's capped at 75%. So in terms of going all the way critical, it would be getting it up to 75% and then letting the rest be just damage. And while the critical thing, increasing that does increase the chance of when you crit, it also increases the amount of damage of when you do get a critical hit. So you could have 75% critical and not as much damage, and then someone else have full blown damage, or even a mix of the two. And when they land a critical hit, they could end up doing more damage than the person with full blown damage and not as much critical, if they have their critical stat up to 75%.
I've always enjoyed a bit of Pierce. It works well with both damage and crit. But one of my favorite builds is what I call a crit get. It's a frigate that's been decked out just to do as much piercing damage as it can, and it, of course, you stack critical after that, so you get a pretty big hit from a ship that doesn't deliver a lot of damage just naturally.
Yeah, critical is really nice, especially if the thing that you're attacking has a lot of armor. Otherwise, piercing doesn't provide much benefit, because the only time it actually really is of good use is if you're going up against someone with a lot of armor, because otherwise it doesn't do any damage. The piercing is just for how much does your attacks negate their armor, because the armor's used to negate a certain percentage of damage, and then the pierce will go against however much they negate, and then that amount that you go against that they negate, you can apply that much more damage. So if a person doesn't have any armor at all, then the piercing is not going to do anything. You're just going to however much damage you are going to do anyways to them, you're going to do. But if the person has armor, then the pierce is good, because then you'll be able to provide more damage than you were otherwise.
So
sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I said so. It's much better for those really hard nuts to crack, like the Dreadlord turtle ships and ships of the line and things like that.
Yeah.
Our support players. Support players tend to, well, they're almost forced by the nature of the items they get to go heavy into armor. Speaking of which, that brings us to specialists. If you want to discuss like the different items, how to build something, what timers are, and all that kind of stuff. Faize can show it on the screen. That captains, specialists, and crews. Eventually, once we get out of these low levels, they'll have timers. Usually a +10, -10 kind of situation, like +10 offense, -10 support for like a deeps player would work pretty well. And you can do that +30, -30 when you get all three going. Can really affect the way your ship plays.
Yeah, and with the specialists, +% on timers is a bad thing. You want negative because the plus adds time to the timer, where the negative subtracts time from the timer. But yeah, and with the timers, that all depends on your playstyle. Like, for example, I know that with my Zeppelin, I don't have it quite built to a support ship, while I still have the specialization of this, where you've got defensive, offensive, or support, which you can only have one selected at one time, and you can only get the benefits from one of them, even though if you have talents put into all three of them. With my Zeppelin, I have it in the support spec. However, I have none of the timers going towards support, which is used for reducing the water barrel skill and fog. I don't have any of the timers going towards that, and I have all my timers going towards offensive, which will reduce the timer for grog and volley. And I use that to make the Zeppelin into basically a bomber, to specifically use the grog and just the grog, instead of which a support ship balances between throwing grog and healing people with the water barrel. And with that, I'm able to run in and throw multiple barrels of grog within a shorter time period than a normal support Zeppelin probably would if they had their timers towards support. So that's all based on like a playstyle of wanting to, be more on the offensive and throw a bunch of grog. So with timers and stuff like that, it's all based on what your kind of playstyle is. Are you more of the stay back and attack, or right in the thick of it attack, or in and out in the thick of it attacking? And there's many different types of playstyles to this that have different skill involvements to it. And that's another thing, where you might have what you think are the best items. The way this game works is really solely based on skill. While you can have the best item, someone else that doesn't have that good of items can still outdo you through skill. Even if they don't do as much damage or whatever, they can still, say, dodge your grog and stuff like that, and end up winning the game of attrition, pretty much. And also in terms of another way of playing to your own style, with the specializations, you don't necessarily, or just the general talents, whatever, you don't necessarily have to put all your talents into those specific items. Like, for my Zeppelin build, I've got only one talent into Diplomatic Immunity, which that is your reputation reduces the enemy's desire to engage you in combat until you get closer by up to 3% of your diplomacy. So what that means is that you have to get close, really close, in order, really close to an enemy in order for them to start attacking you, or to be able to attack you. That is with like falling and stuff like that. Now they can hit you with a grog if you are within range, within throwing range. But I only have 1 talent point into there, where probably a lot of other people have 3 talent points into there. And how many talent points you have in there increases the percentage of the that's the wrong key. Increases the percentage of your diplomacy that it uses to give you like a buffering range, pretty much. Do you have to be right on top of them, or do you have to be pretty close to them?
Would you like to start another combat instance?
We can do that.
That's pretty much the way to go, unless you want to join someone else's.
We could possibly do that.
There is a Jake the Snake Yar. Let me see if his is open. And it is. Just jump on that player's stuff. We'll swarm him.
Alright.
Oh, they're halfway done. Lovely. But you can join instances. It's a right click, and then it opens up a little tab for you to choose to join or to observe even.
Yeah. But it has to be open, or the person that started has to do /open in order for it to in order for you to just join in it.
Also, if the instance is above your level, you won't be able to quest or interact with the towns in any way but to trade. To sell, that is, not to trade.
Yeah, you can sell to them, but you can't buy from them.
Yeah, your tab, the towns list will be locked to you.
And do keep in mind that when you join someone else's instance, that, and if their level is higher, well, you can see it even right now probably, that the ships are already stronger, and there's stronger towers that attack you as well, so you'll die a lot quicker.
That is very true. It's always a good guide if you're below level to stay away from towers. They do massive amounts of damage to low level players for some reason.
Yeah.
It's a combination of people.
It's well, really just all in scaling. Like I was saying earlier, you'll get, if you're a higher level than what a region is, you'll get scaled down to it. However, if you're a lower level than what a region is, your numbers might seem like they go up to what, that region might be. However, you don't actually get scaled up to that region. So the towers are doing damage.
You do, but you're missing a lot of base points as far as stats go on your ship. Like if you're riding around in a sloop, your base stats are 100, whereas the players around you might be at 500.
Yeah.
The scaling does work. I mean, it does work up. That's in some situations it's better to be a level 100 or a level 80 than it is to be a level 220.
For some cases. But that's, well, really, I think that's just because of the way that the scaling down works.
No, I was meaning if they both entered a 240 zone, one's a 200 level and one's a 100 level. Sometimes the scaling works out better for the 100 level than it does the 200.
Sometimes, yeah, I guess.
It depends on what item combinations we're working at a particular level.
Yeah. And also it depends on the skill of each of the people, because when the scaling might work in favor of the lower level, however the lower level might not be as good skill-wise as the higher level, or the lower level might be, more skilled than the higher level.
I take a good item set over being lucky that I missed a grog pretty much every time.
really doesn't always have to be up to luck. I mean, like, there is patterns that you can see, and like you can sometimes, or for a large time, predict, you know, where they're gonna throw it, just based on, like, if you watch the AI for a while, you can predict, you know, okay, if I go over here, they're gonna throw a grog here, so I can start to go over this, turning this direction, but then turn the other direction so that they throw the grog over here when actually I'm going over here.
We did start the conversation talking about wind. When you're in a PvP fight, take advantage of the wind. Get above them if the wind's going down. Get below them if the wind's going up. It'll really help you if it comes to a situation where you must dodge.
Yeah.
And so you can even outrun volleys to a certain extent.
Yeah, to a certain extent, unless the person has an unreal range, which has happened a lot, where people have outrun me, or where they should have outrun my range. Yet, if you launch a volley right when they're within the range, the volley will follow them and hit them, which is rather interesting. But another good strategy to use in avoiding people, or to know when someone's coming, so you can know, get ready to dodge any incoming grog or whatever, is to look at the minimap a lot, or pay a lot of attention to the minimap, because the minimap can tell you a lot more than what you think, especially if you are blinded by like a fog of war. As soon as you see like a circle pop up, you know that someone's coming for you, so you can start moving forward pretty much and start to try and like circle around them. Then also you can even if you can't see them on the minimap, you can watch for shadows on the water, because they will, especially if they're flying a ship, they will put a shadow on the water, and you can see that and use that to kind of predict their movements.
And if we're talking about PvP, something that a new player may not know is look for dots on the minimap that are moving not as they should be.
Very true.
Yeah.
There's a slash anon mode.
Yeah. Yeah, /anon will cause you to appear as an NPC on the minimap. So you will not see... Right now on the minimap, players are resembled as stars. And so that's how you know a player versus an NPC, where they're just a little circle. So with PvP, the person you're going against can do /anon and appear as an NPC. So if NPCs will act a certain way and move a certain way, so if that circle is moving erratically, or what seems to be an erratic movement, you can probably assume that it is a player. And also another thing you do is, if you're not sure if it's NPC or a player, is that you can open up the menu and then hover over that dot, and it will tell you the name of that ship, so you can see if it's like a player name or if it's a normal AI ship name. Which normal AI ship name will have like Captain, whatever, or Dreadlord, whatever, or Pirate Lord, whatever, or Lieutenant, whatever, Commander, whatever, Admiral, whatever.
Yeah, for me, lots of times the dead giveaway is if you see a dot setting a course towards you and it's kind of evading the turrets, which the AI will not evade turrets. They'll try to fight turrets.
Yeah.
I believe, I haven't tried it in over a year or two, but you can type /who in our region to see if there are any /unknown players. It only works if you're local with them, though.
Now, if they're Anon, then you can't see them. even if you do /2, if they're in the region with you and you /2 and they're in Anon, you will not be able to see them. The only way that you'd be able to do that is if you're an admin.
I remember doing it on the first map. It must have changed.
Oh, there's a lot of XP.
Yeah.
Yeah, we go up very fast now.
Well,
Yeah,
that means that we can start doing some crazy pirating of the yellow. No, I'm just playing.
Yeah, I only got up to 14.
Well, you know, since we haven't really talked, or I don't recall if you guys said much about factions or politics, I was just thinking in terms of the timers on the items, the ones that either increase or decrease your cooldowns by a percentage. The ones you want are green, and the ones you don't want are red. And that's pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, that's all a new player would need to know about the politics. You want green, you don't want red.
That is a very valid and good point. The one thing I would add to it is each faction has a different volley. So if you're going heavy into the volley, which I am currently in red, my volley is a reduced timer, although it's less accurate. It's called Reckless Volley. This is the starter faction with that, and I think green has regular volley, and Sojourn is the blue faction, and they have the aim volley.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Exchange, yeah, Sojourn has aim volley, and also Exchange has just the normal volley.
So it's something to consider in your play styles. Like a more tanky player, I think, would really benefit from the reckless volley. I know a lot of deeps players, they tend to like it as well.
Yeah, but then you have the defensive bonus from Sojourn. And really, and in my personal opinion, I liked the aim volley better. At least I'm a heavy DPS player, but I mean, like, I've got my timer, I've got everything towards, offensive, reducing my offensive timers, or offensive skills, being volley and grog, or whatever. And I feel like that it's low enough as it is, that with like a aim volley, with everything towards, all the timers towards offensive, I think aim volley is like 3.2 seconds. So, while having reckless volley being like 2.3 seconds or something like that. I mean, there's a gap there in time, but I feel like for the greater damage that the aim volley provides, or just the greater concentration of that volley, it's better to have that little bit of extra time and then be able to make more precise volleys, especially if you have like if your build is a little higher crit than damage, because then you can get those areas, and then when you hit those like little sweet spots on a ship and you get a critical, then it's gonna really devastate this ship. And the aim volley allows you to hit those little sweet spots on the ship, or on the ships, better than saying reckless volley. Which, I mean, it's nice to just really just like send out tons and tons of volleys, just like boom, 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 boom. But I think it's almost better to have it a little bit more precise than to just spray it all over the place. That's just my personal opinion of using all the different volleys.
Well, I've gotten my first ship from the sloop. I've gone up to a schooner. I've had that for a couple of minutes now. That little engagement that we had with our friends there was quite beneficial as well. Pretty much upgraded my stuff. What about you guys? Where are you sitting?
I jumped right to the brigantine.
Yeah, nice. I picked up the schooner just because I like it for its speed. But yeah, the brig's not much difference.
Yeah, I can't. I only have 8,000 gold. Looking at changing that at the moment. try and get more money to be able to get the schooner. I don't think that's gonna happen.
We could talk about classes a little bit. I was kind of thinking maybe we would all play a class. Like eventually, maybe I'll be tank, or if Tackle wants to tank, that kind of thing. We can do this in the future episodes. We can show how a team works together to take on goals.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
I've gotten my first crew that has a timer on it. This is port defense, kind of forcing my hands with my captain that has a diplomacy factor instead of a damage factor to become more of a support style. Although I don't have grog yet, which is scary. Oh, I can get grog now, so looking okay.
Yeah, I don't have any timers in any of my stuff. I don't even have a specialist yet.
I don't either. Oh, I have skills. I have Defiance, and I have Grog, and I have Knots. No, the Nauseous Cloud. Nauseous Cloud is one of the most important skills within game. I mean, yeah, Grog's great. It's awesome. It's going to be your deeps if you're fighting as a DPS fighter. It's going to be your go-to other than the Fire Mortar, or if you're support, this is going to be your only damage output, and it will output a lot of damage. But Nauseous Cloud is something that will decrease your opponent's skills, generally across the board, particularly in accuracy and in armor. So if you're trying to take on something like a dragon or a king or a dread, Nauseous Cloud is going to come in helpful.
Yeah, and Noxious Cloud does different things depending on what specialization you are in. Like if you're an offensive, then it's going to cause the person not to be able to use hasty repairs or just generally heal. And if you're in, and it will also like stick. But then if you are in like support or defense, then it loses those things, and it'll not sure if it reduces armor or if that's just an offensive thing too. But a general basis of what Nox does across all specializations is slow you down and then also cause you to throw cannonballs in every which other direction instead of a more focused volley that would just go in every other direction.
You know, I've never noticed that that it had different effects per class, per specialization. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's why that's why like the little trick of using Nox to capture a town only works with offensive, and it doesn't work with defense or support. And then with offensive players, Grog acts like a second Nox. So in terms of healing, so if you throw a Grog on someone, they will become sick, and you're in it. If you have the offensive spec, then they'll become sick or get that debuff, and then they will not be able to use hasty repairs. Whereas if you're in support or defensive, they won't get that sick debuff if you throw Grog on them.
Yeah, there was a big discussion about Grog versus Nox in global chat earlier, since we have all these new players right now, and that was what I told them was, Grog, it does a lot more when you're in the early game and the lower levels, and you're fighting lower end ships. You can almost one shot with the Grog even when you're not support. But as you go up, like what really saves you is Nox. Like I'll do it just so that they miss me with their mortars, and their Grog, because they just become horribly inaccurate with it, and they'll whiff you completely even if you're not moving.
Yeah, with Grog, you can still do a large amount of damage with that, even if you don't have full support or a high diplomacy spec, whatever, because it's not just going off of diplomacy, it also goes off of damage. But I am out of time. I think that's...
Oh, well, that's perfectly fine then.
Yeah, we've been going for 40 minutes.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Well, goodbye, and it was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Hope to see you next weekend. And goodbye, YouTube. Goodbye, world, as it is. Hope you have a good day.
Yeah. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out other videos I have done. And I will see you in another video. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.